VIII might be the most famous king to ever come to the throne in British history. Why is he famous, you may ask? Well, he just loved getting rid of his wives. The man loved divorce so much he reintroduced it even though it hadn't been allowed by the Catholic Church since the times of ancient Greece. If he really hated you, your fate would be worse than that even, and you would find your head quickly at the mercy of his best executioner. But enough about him. As you can see, this series is called Women of History, not history of a man that smelled so bad by the end of his life that people couldn't stand to be in the same room as him. No, today we'll be talking about the women who stood next to him, the women married to one of the most notorious bastards of British monarchy. To start off Henry's tarnished history with these women is a woman who herself was not even supposed to be married to him in the first place. Catherine of Aragon, daughter of Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain, was originally betrothed to Henry's oldest brother, Arthur. The marriage had been planned since Catherine was just 3 years of age. Around the age of 16, Catherine set off for England. Their wedding took place in London, and Catherine accompanied her husband to Wales, where, unfortunately, he died of a sweating sickness. The marriage lasted less than 6 months, and it was supposed that it was never consummated. Catherine was then betrothed to Arthur's younger brother, Prince Henry, in order for the kingdom to keep her dowry and good relations with Spain. 18-year-old Henry became king in 1509 and married Catherine. Now, every video or essay I've come across describing the marriage described it as happy, healthy, because they were married for many years, around 2 decades. This may be true to some standard. Of course, it's easy to work hard on a marriage when you know you can't leave it. So what was the problem they faced? Well, the biggest problem you could face as a monarch in the 1500s, not having any male heirs. Catherine actually gave birth to 6 children, 2 of which were boys, but with only 1 surviving child, as the others were lost to being stillborn, it didn't look promising for Catherine's condition with giving birth to any children in general, let alone the boy that Henry so desperately wanted. So what did Henry do? Luckily for Catherine, Henry hadn't found his passion for whacking off women's heads yet. With divorce being illegal and Henry having to get the written annulment from the Pope himself, Henry started to scheme. He appointed himself as head of the Church of England, a new church where conveniently getting divorced is permitted. And if you're wondering if a king appointing himself as a new head of church will be a problem later down the line, that's a story for another video. So Henry divorces Catherine. Now, what should I say about Catherine? Catherine is an extremely educated woman. She was taught by her mother Isabella and was very knowledgeable in languages and the way of the courts. Catherine, a devout Catholic, still maintained her right to England and the throne even after Henry exiled her. So to anyone saying they had a healthy and loving marriage for 2 decades, how much does this matter when she's stripped of her rights, her royal rights and also her legal rights, and dies just 3 years after the separation? She's exiled, she's miserable, and she's still claiming that she is the rightful wife of Henry. Catherine is just the start of the long list of women whose lives were ruined by Henry VIII's stupidity and wrong decisions. This woman, for some reason, to bless Henry with her time and affection, is probably the most famous out of all of the wives. Now, I'm not saying that Henry himself was not attractive. By all accounts, he was a bit of a hunk in his early years. But when I think of him, all I can think of is that portrait of him where he looks like you could pop him if you took a pin to his belly. Now listen, is fat phobia okay in the year 2026? No, but when it's towards a man that played with 6 women's lives so egregiously, I think it might be okay. Now back to Anne. If your only introduction to Anne Boleyn is the train wreck that was The Other Boleyn Girl starring Natalie Portman, then I feel eternally sorry for you. Although the movie does depict a very real aspect of history of the Boleyn family, namely the physical relationship between Mary, Anne's sister, and the king himself, the majority of the movie is inaccurate at best. The real Anne was smart, cunning, knew her way around the courts, and knew what was expected of the future Queen of England. She knew that she'd have to make a lasting impression on Henry and wanted to be his wife. badly. She could not make the same choices her sister once did. Anne was smart, confident, and knew her own self-worth. She was everything that was against the norm of what was seen as a woman at that time. Her knowledge of court life and intelligence made her irresistible to the king. Anne was the attending to Catherine of Aragon when Henry first laid eyes on her, and he tried his best to start a secret relationship with her, but she knew better than to become just one of his mistresses. She famously said, "I am your queen." In 1533, quickly after getting married, Anne gave birth to Elizabeth I, future Queen of England and the last of the Tudor line. However, she was unable to give Henry the son he desperately needed and grew frustrated and ill of jealousy, which would lead to her tragic end. She was executed on false charges of witchcraft, incest, and adultery in 1536. And when we're thinking at this time, what kind of possession would someone have to accuse a woman of adultery, of witchcraft? And the point is, Anne didn't stand for his mistresses in the way that she was supposed to as queen. She was confident, she knew her place, and she knew how to excel in the court life. And just because she was failing to give him a male heir, as well as speaking out against behaviours that a woman normally wouldn't, she met her tragic end and was the first of Henry's wives to be beheaded. Henry's third wife was the exact opposite of Anne Boleyn. Jane Seymour was docile, meek and sweet. Henry married her just 11 days after the death of Anne Boleyn. He was 45, she was 27. This is the wife that gave Henry exactly what he had always dreamed of. This was the mother of Henry's son Edward, who was born in October 1538. Jane was the typical woman of the time, what a woman in the 16th century should have been. She was modest, shy, submissive, unlike Anne Boleyn. Jane Seymour even tried to reaffirm Princess Mary's right to the throne, which is something that Anne Boleyn previously had a problem with because she felt like her daughter Elizabeth was threatened by Mary's existence. As a queen, Jane wanted to get rid of Anne Boleyn's influence and re-establish virtuous principles of Catherine of Aragon. Her efforts to return the king to Catholicism were greatly appreciated by the people of England. Fortunately, Jane died giving birth to Edward, and this was always considered Henry's great love. In all of the documents you read about their marriage, about Henry after the fact, he always referred to her as his beloved, the wife that he cannot let go of. Jane Seymour was perfect for Henry VIII, perfect to be Queen of England, and unfortunate circumstances ripped them away from each other. And the marriages going forward are in some way or another political alliances, and this is very much true for Henry's fourth wife. Now, Anne of Cleves was recommended to Henry by Chancellor Cromwell because he thought suggesting a Protestant alliance would be very beneficial to the crown. Henry wanted another son to secure the future of the Tudor dynasty. The painter, Harris Holborn, was sent to paint the portraits of Anne and her sister so that the king could see how they looked. The portrait of Anne had a few similarities, but the king was being convinced by Cromwell that Anne was beautiful, a mistake that cost him his life, because when Anne turned up, let's just say Henry wasn't best pleased with the way that she looked. She had no dowry, no accomplishments, she could only speak German, and she wasn't the best looking in Henry's eyes. They were only married for 6 months, and she was never even crowned. The couple divorced, and Anne of Cleves was moved away from the court. She quietly complied to Henry's wishes regarding the arrangements made for her, by which she received valuable lands, should bear the title of the king's sister, and not leave the kingdom. After the divorce, Anne spent considerate time with the king and his new queen, Catherine Howard, playing cards or eating dinner at court. She outlived Henry and died in 1557. Catherine was cheerful, youthful, and carefree, and who would be surprised that a womanizer like Henry VIII wouldn't be drawn to a 19-year-old youthful girl that knew no better than to get married to this grimy man? The king himself referred to her as his rose without a thorn. She was queen for 18 months, and she was only known for her love of luxury. Now, a lot of historians, when they're talking about her, describe her as loving the attention of men and enjoyed dancing balls and masks. And can I just say that as a 19-year-old who's just been thrust into the position of Queen of England to a man that is 50, 31 years your senior, wouldn't you also try to get the best out of it and try to make the best of a situation where you'd have to lay next to a 50-year-old man every single night? This is the one thing I absolutely disagree with historians on, because how dare you shame a woman for making the best out of a situation of naivety, because she's only 19, let's be honest, her brain hasn't fully developed. She's trying to make the best out of a situation because she's been forced to marry a fat, old, gross man who will probably cheat on her anyway. I don't know, she deserves justice. Historians go on to say that she was not interested in religious or political affairs because she's 19, so she could not upset the king in these matters, but her crime was silliness. Flirtations were the problem. Henry himself could not handle the fact that other people found this young teenage wife attractive. And whose fault was that? Of hers, of course. Naturally, she was more attracted to men her own age, and soon she was arrested for adultery, with no proof. Initially, Henry refused to believe that Catherine was guilty, but the findings were soon confirmed and she was beheaded on February 1542. Now, whether these things are confirmed true or not, whether the evidence is real or not, doesn't really matter. When you think of the grand scheme of things and you look back at it now, this marriage would be completely unacceptable in today's society. It was even looked down upon back then, so imagine how it would be viewed now. I can't blame her if she wanted to get some action, if she had to lay next to Henry VIII every night. Damn. Catherine Parr, the last of Henry's wives, was a twice-widowed woman when she married the king. She was mild-mannered, well-educated, sensible more than anything else, but there was one problem. She was in love with Thomas Seymour at the time when the king noticed her. Who could defy the king's will? It was law, so Catherine bowed to Henry's demands with grace. Now, to paint a picture of the time, Henry is very, very sick at this point. He is riddled with God knows what. He has cuts, pus, bruises everywhere. He is in a real state. He has things that leak. He has things that itch. And it's said that he smelled so bad that even people 3 rooms away could smell him. And what was Catherine's job? To tend to his sickness, of course, like the good wife she was. He named her regent when he departed in July 1544 in yet another invasion for France. Lady Parr was the most married English queen after the king had died. She married her love, Thomas Seymour, her 4th husband, and then she died in childbirth. And what does this teach us about the marriages? It teaches us that they were just women. They were just women. Some of them were smart, some of them were uneducated, some of them were timid, some of them were confident. All of them were not believed when they got told that they were a certain way, adulterous, loose, you could say. And I think that it really points a big picture of how women were viewed then and how it's not much different to how women are viewed now. And can I say that I believe 100% Anne Boleyn would not have been killed if people respected women more. She would not have been killed if people used 2 seconds to rub their brain cells together. But that is the point of Henry VIII. Henry VIII left nothing but destruction, disaster, death at his doorstep, because all he wanted to do was to get his own simple pleasures, and it doesn't matter who he hurt in his path. The women that devoted their lives, gave their lives in some circumstances to make him happy. He just wanted what he wanted and nothing was going to get in the way. And where did that lead him? The end of the Tudor dynasty is where that led him, because he could not be unselfish enough to actually think about how to build a strong family and how to build strong family ties and connections. All he could think about was the next girl that he was trying to get into bed. And that's why, in my opinion, this is the most tragic love stories of all time, because these women had nothing to do with him. They had nothing to do with the marriage, no say in the marriage, and if they did choose to pursue him, it was for political alliances or political acceleration, because in that time, women could know no better. Women could have no better. So being the queen was the goal, the dream, because it meant you had some right, some status, and some respect, where other places, women got none. And that's what I see when I see the queens of England, Henry VIII's wives. That's what I see. I see a group of women trying to make a better life for themselves, a group of women that are trying to better themselves. And what did that get them? Death, destruction, heartache, exiled. It's a story as old as time.